get back started with a live presenter who came from all the way across campus. One of my colleagues here at the University of Arizona, and a friend, and somebody that I'm thrilled is on our faculty, and who works on some of the coolest projects that I ever get a chance to play with, is Dr. Jekan Thanga, and he's going to talk about cryopreservation. So, Jekan, over to you.
Thank you for this. And I just wanted to say, I'm just learning really a breadth of whole new knowledge areas in this really interesting space. I just wanted to acknowledge my co-authors here, Alvaro, who's in the audience, in addition to our Pedersen, Athip, and a few others, of course, who have been working with us on this. So our topic here is cryopreservation of organisms in space in preparation for interstellar travel. And I just want to quickly go through, and this has been echoed right throughout this conference, is what is our real motivation to want to leave Earth? And of course, we have a whole bunch of potentially extinction scale events that have almost gotten us or will in some time in the future. In fact, we've had very close calls. Added to that, now we have the additional powers of being able to destroy ourselves, probably in a very limited time frame. And so, putting all of these factors in here, really from a preservation point of view, we are under serious threats. And really one of our closest calls that we had was about 75,000 years ago. That was thanks to a supervolcanic eruption. But throughout our history, we've had major cataclysms. In fact, the end of empires, such as the Minoan civilization, due to the volcanic explosions in the Greek peninsula. The other has been the Great Fog of Middle Ages. The term Dark Ages comes from that, and of course, the bubonic plague that wiped out much of Europe, and more recently even the smallpox epidemics that wiped out considerable numbers of people. So cataclysms are really the norm, and really one of the most dangerous ones, where humanity almost got wiped out. At least that's what the data seems to suggest, was the Toba supervolcanic eruption that happened about 75,000 years ago. It would have impacted much of the southern hemisphere. At about that time, much of humanity would have been in Africa, but also sort of spreading out into Asia and much of the southern hemisphere. And this resulted in a cooling period, supposedly for about 1,000 years. There's been traces of ash all throughout the southern hemisphere from this impact event. And that aligns well with a considerable drop in human diversity. So, our current theory suggests we're at least about 200,000 years old, Homo sapien sapien. But if you were to look at the genetics, we can only go back to about 75,000 years, which is this event. And so that suggests that there was a really narrow culling of humanity, perhaps down to a few thousand folks. So given all of these factors, given the advancements that we're seeing, and very exciting advancements, particularly being able to see exoplanets and being able to even notice habitable zones, surely, one of our future goals would be to, hunt for a Earth 2.0. What I wanted to say there is we have to also sort of balance ethical and moral grounds here. Particularly if we're going after this new planet to habitat, it probably is not already habited, and so it is perhaps going to become habited, but not currently there, and so that would make a case for why we could go on this interstellar trip. But nevertheless, there are going to be huge challenges, as I'm going to just talk about, not just the propulsion element or the physics element, but really the human factors element, and really being able to put this mission together. And in that sense, and I'm going to focus more on the human factors element and the mission is to do this. Not only should we have to travel with a human crew, we'll need to bring quite a lot with us. Perhaps Earth's diversity with us. And that's really needed just to keep ourselves healthy, maintain our quality of life and so on. But there's also challenges here. If this thing is going to take many generations, will future generations still have the zeal to continue with this mission? Along the way, is there going to be conflict between the human crew? If it's too rigid rules, it may lead to disobedience and civil strife. If it's too lax rules, it may be leading to even splintering and separation. So it's unclear really how future generations would react in a multi-generation mission like this. And added to this, of course, the physics effects of relativity and so on. So the challenges here, of course, is that this interstellar ship, where we're sending perhaps humanity's future, is going to be vulnerable. Its resources, relatively speaking, are going to be scarce. And what we have learned with putting humans in congested environments for long periods of time so far hasn't shown the success that we really desire. And so, the question is, can it lead to chaos and unexpected outcomes? Given these factors, and given the need that we need to carry, biodiversity with us, particularly medicines, rich source of food, need for our well-being and health, it's really quite hard to separate the human side of these things from the ecology side, and we need to really be able to carry both. And so, how much of Earth's biodiversity can we take with us, and if we're really serious about, colonizing? So one of the things I think that does give us hope looking at this area is the ability to put creatures into cryogenic sleep. And this can significantly slow down their aging process. By putting them into sleep, we can also avoid having to bring along resources and having to consume these resources. So no need for vast food reserves, entertainment, maybe even regular living quarters, because we're going to be able to put creatures to sleep. And ultimately, or ideally, you would have your crew and passengers wake up near the destination, ready and fresh to go. And what about in between? What about till that last leg of the journey? Perhaps the use of robotics to really take care of everything else. And so with this, that's sort of the aspiration. But that's what we have been trying to see from this research, how far we can go with such an aspiration. Particularly, it could be enabling for interstellar travel, of course. The other is to protect Earth's biodiversity in a safe spot, well away from the cataclysms of Earth. But it can also be transformational towards life here, from a medical point of view, increased quality of life, and really be transformational there. So there are some great success stories I wanted to just mention to you guys. That is, we have, for example, seen one species of plants come back from extinction. This is the Judean date palm. At one time, it was widely valued in the Israeli and Palestinian areas, and due to human history, it went extinct. And however, some people in those historical times had the courage to save these seeds, and this was near the Black Sea, and they were well preserved, and they were actually able to bring this back to life in the last 10 years or so. And so this was something that's 2,000 years old that was brought back to life. Pushing even further, we've seen Arctic flowering plants that have been preserved for 32,000 years brought back to life. And another example, perhaps more related to the subject here, is we've had cryo-frozen mice, and this was a Japanese-led research in which they had it frozen on the ISS for 6 years, then brought it back down to ground, had them, live off their lives, and you literally had, pups of mice come out from this, and seemed to be healthy and unaffected. So these show some of the great potential, but there's still, long ways to go. The other is I wanted to insert that, given these advances, really our highest priority would be to try to protect diversity. And there's already efforts going on with this, particularly through the Southbod Seed Vault. But, could we scale this up towards protecting all of Earth's diversity? And so that could be a, modern day global insurance policy. And one of the things that we have proposed is setting this up on some of the lava tubes on the moon. It's only about a 4 to 5 days journey from Earth. And these lava tubes are likely pristine or have been pristine for about the last 3.5 to 4 billion years. There's nothing like this on the surface of Earth. Everything else gets recycled on Earth due to plate tectonics and whatever else. And so, this could be the place to go for preservation. But let me just jump into cryopreservation here, and that would be the route to do this. To date, there has been success of cryopreserving eggs, sperm, stem cells, individual cells. But going beyond that towards multiple organisms is a whole different story. And to date, what they've noticed is you can actually control the degradation. And the technology is definitely maturing, and it works. It is possible. The challenge, though, is also another sort of leg of this. It's called cryonics, in which the attempt is to preserve an entire body. And here people have been trying to use that as a means to try to extend their lives beyond death. So you take someone just about to die, put them into this sort of cryopreservation cryonics lab, and the idea here is to wait for a time in the future when they're back in again to be brought back to life, or maybe we can overcome diseases that they're being inflicted with and such. The biggest challenge here is the freezing. The freezing causes ice crystals to form, and it can damage the body internals irreversibly. Now, newer techniques use cryoprotectants for this, which are sort of antifreeze type substances. Natural creatures live in the Arctic, and they can live in a surrounding where everything is frozen, but they actually have a natural antifreeze that actually protects them, but not to cryogenic temperatures, of course. So the general agreement is this technology is pretty much daunting, unlikely to see a breakthrough in our lifetime in this case. However, what I think is a more practical alternative is this idea of torpor. And that is going into a hibernation stage, much like how bears hibernate, or much like how our other mammalian cousins hibernate, but really adapting that to humans. And so this is a technology that's been advanced by SpaceWorks out of Atlanta, Georgia. And they propose putting humans into this hibernation stage. And we have encountered torpor type situations in the emergency room. Particularly, there have been these, random instances when, for example, people have fallen into a frozen lake bed, and by all standards, they should be dead, but instead they come back life. And they're close to death for many hours, maybe even days, weeks, but they come back to life. And this is thanks to this phenomena, where and to torpor, particularly with what SpaceWorks has been able to do, is to actually sort of environmentally control the situation and really bring it into an application mode as opposed to a sort of a reaction mode here, and bring down the temperature of the body down below your regular 37, down by 10 degrees centigrade. And at that point, your body slows down, becomes very low metabolism, and you can use this. In fact, they've been using this to save patients from some of the crisis modes these days. So with torpor, your body is slowed down, it's not stopped, so it still needs resources, it still needs food, it still needs air to sustain itself. And of course, the body is going to age, but at a very low metabolism. And so overall, it's reduced complexity. Lower metabolism means lower resources needed, big savings in mass and volume possible if you're going to put them on a spacecraft, and viable for years. But of course, it's unclear, the effects of radiation here. And of course, it's unclear what the upper limit is. Is the age still going to be about 100 for regular humans? Or is somebody torpor extended, for 50 to 75 years? Are they going to have double their lifetime, perhaps? We don't know that yet. So one of the things we wanted to sort of investigate is can we start, recreating some of these situations with cell and fundamental experiments? And so to start there, particularly to understand, for example, lunar conditions, we can try to recreate that using a centrifuge. And we've been looking at ongoing efforts there with AOSAT and AOSAT Plus, which are centrifuges to try to recreate asteroid environments. But using the same principle, we can push that towards recreating lunar environments on an on-orbit lab. And so our proposal here is to set up an on-orbit lab that would maintain conditions at cryo and be able to take with us 3 different organisms: tardigrades, mice, chickens. And we figure these would be some of the earliest to try, and you would put them in this centrifuge, which would operate at cryo temperatures and be spinning and producing lunar gravity. And so far, we have done some early concurrent design studies. It's pretty feasible for a few $1 million. It'll require about a half of kilowatt of power, but that's something that we can definitely utilize on the International Space Station. And so with that, really we're at early stages here. There are potential wide-scale benefits from this whole way of looking at things, of being able to preserve life for long periods. And of course, the big application and most relevant here is interstellar travel. There are human factors involved that we can't completely ignore, but really the options that come up, if it were to be directly applied to interstellar travel right now, is to be able to send eggs, sperms, seeds, and so on this trip, and have them grow on that trip at the last stages. And so that is a possibility with the current paradigm, but we're going to have robots really run the whole system until then. So that might be a huge leap. That might be too risky for us in our current paradigms. However, if we're desperate, if we're not in a situation that we're in the present moment, maybe that becomes viable, right? So having said that, the other, of course, is torpor, and it's very definitely viable, but that can only last us for decades. And so if it's a shorter term mission that's going to be a few decades long, then I think torpor is it. So with that, thank you, and I'd be happy to take your questions.
So within torpor, how do you overcome biological degradation like muscular dystrophy in the cryogenic sleep?
So with the body going into that state, none of these other factors seem to develop. So that's interesting. But this is only based on some of the limited studies done. But even with torpor, it has not been done at the scale of years. So it's only been done for days and weeks. So that tells you there's still lots to study.
Can you talk a little bit about the biological antifreezes at all, and like the mechanisms about how they disrupt the ice crystal formation?
Sure. So there have been sea creatures in the Arctic ice that live, and the surrounding temperatures could, if it was water, it would lead to instantaneous freezing. So these creatures have adapted to have literally antifreeze type liquids circulate their body and keep them from freezing. And it's native to those creatures. It'll be, of course, interesting considering how much we have been advancing with genetics, of how much we could borrow that and perhaps use that to augment the human body or mammals in general. And that could be an interesting pathway, but nothing really has been done in terms of the augmentation yet.
Mm-hmm. Are those glycol-like molecules?
Well, they have the lower freezing properties. I'm not specifically sure if they're glycol related, but I would imagine they're producible with sort of this whole ecosystem of biochemicals, as opposed to your regular antifreeze, which is quite poisonous and toxic.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
John, thank you. Appreciate it.